like, all right,
They
I
were
thought this
for
was a
me
good
for
topic.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you get to learn, even when you're speaking on your own topics, you learn, but then you also learn from the other lawyers who are joining in. So I'm pretty sure we'll learn today a lot from Mark. Um, and so I think they're very good, especially early on. I think it's very helpful taking part in these. And I believe we are live now, and we only have a minute before our actual session starts. And I also see we do have some attendees trickling in. Welcome everyone who's joining us today. We will be starting very soon. This is our first one back after the summer break. Mark, you have kids. Are they in school?
Wednesday.
Wednesday? Okay. Well, I don't have kids, so I want to know. Okay, everyone, it is 5 o'clock on the dot, so we'll get started. Welcome to all our viewers to Family Law Now After Hours. Today, me, Mark, Jen, we are all talking about how to begin the separation process. Please note the purpose of this series is to discuss general information on separation, divorce, and family law matters. Any information provided here should not be construed as legal advice. You can feel free to use the Q&A feature to submit any comments or questions that you might have. If you have questions regarding your specific matter, please call our office or a lawyer in your area to book a consultation to receive tailored advice. Stay tuned until the end as we will be sharing how you can schedule a free consultation of up to 20 minutes with one of our lawyers. Our speakers for today, I will move on to the bios from Mark, Jen, and myself. Mark is an associate lawyer at Russell Alexander Collaborative Family Lawyers, guiding clients through family law with solutions that save time and resources. He previously ran his own practice, gaining experience in trials, mediations, and arbitrations, and now serves as principal to the firm's articling student Jen. Mark is a father of three teenage boys, has coached two baseball teams over the past 3 years, and enjoys mentoring. He has also served on the Hamilton Road Business Improvement Association board. Outside of work, he serves on the Middlesex Law Association and Oak Ridge Optimist baseball boards and pursues his passion for health and fitness. Thank you for joining us today, Mark. We also have Jen with us today. Jen earned her Juris Doctor degree from the University of Windsor, where she developed a strong passion for family law, mediation, and litigation. A three-time winner of the Windsor Law Mediation Competition. Yay! She's committed to helping families resolve disputes through empathy and collaboration. Geneva gained valuable experience working at a not-for-profit legal clinic, supporting vulnerable populations and deepening her client-centered approach. Outside of law, she is an avid Yugoslav and dedicated volunteer with Girl Guides of Canada. She is excited to be articling with Russell Alexander, where she looks forward to applying her skills to support clients through their legal challenges. Lastly, there is me. I'm a dedicated family lawyer with a strong focus on compassionate and effective legal representation. My background in business management enhances my strategic approach to legal matters. I excel in negotiation, achieving favorable settlements through strategic dialogue and strong advocacy for my clients. I prioritize clear communication, ensuring that clients are informed and empowered throughout the legal process. Now let's jump right into our topic for today, which is how to begin the separation process. I will start the topic with an introduction on separation. Specifically, I'll speak on what does it mean by separation? How do you separate from your partner? Understanding separation is the first step in navigating your rights and protecting your future when it comes to separating from your spouse and getting divorced. Whether you are married or you're in a common law relationship, knowing when separation begins and what it means can have a major impact on your decisions regarding your finances, regarding parenting, regarding your legal obligations as you move forward through the separation process. It's a deeply personal process, but one that comes with very real legal consequences, and that's why it's so important to approach it with clarity and with proper guidance. In Ontario, separation typically happens when you and your partner decide to end your relationship and you start living separate and apart. Separation applies again whether you're married or common law, but it's important to note that if you're married, being separated doesn't end the marriage. Only a divorce granted by a court will officially end the legal marriage. Separation is the first step of getting to that divorce order. During separation, you still have legal responsibilities, especially if you have children or if you have shared property. That's why many couples they choose to create a separation agreement. This written document can cover things like parenting arrangements, child support, spousal support, division of property. It helps both parties understand their rights and obligations. Understanding separation again is the first step, and getting to that separation agreement is your goal when you hire a lawyer to help you through this process. Now, if someone introduced the topic of what separation is, let's take a step back and look at how you might know when it's time to consider separation in the first place. And to speak more about that, I'm going to turn over to Mark, who will walk us through some of the common signs and situations that may indicate that it's time to, well, reevaluate your relationship and think about separating. Over to you, Mark.
Thank you, Sandra. As you set out there, in terms of what is a separation, of course, there is a whole host of issues that it could arise. But further to that, signs that it's time to consider a separation could include when the relationship is no longer viable, no longer healthy, communications are broken down, there is a persistent lack of communication, there's emotional or physical disconnect, where there's resentment or bitterness. For instance, if one of the spouses has certain pursuits or interests, if they're not supported by the other spouse, there could be dismissive behavior by one spouse over the other. There could also be other signs that would indicate that it's possibly time to consider a separation. Could include manipulation, gaslighting, uh, cycle of arguments. One spouse could be checked out, or there could be a one-sided effort by a spouse. There could also be existence of abuse. At the end of the day, the relationship between the two is to be a common but not exclusive, such that each spouse should still feel the latitude to explore their personal interests. And the nice part of the relationship is that the other spouse is to support each of the other spouse in the pursuit of their interests. Where you feel, whether it's through intuition or emotion, that your personal pursuits or individual interests are no longer um, being supported by the other spouse, that is a sign. Sometimes it's a sign to reprioritize, such that your pursuits of going golfing, maybe they shouldn't take priority over doing things around the house. But if you've got your priorities as far as your personal pursuits balanced just so, and you've done some self-reflection and you're still not feeling supported by the other spouse, that could be a sign that it's time to consider a separation.
Thank you, Mark. That was a thoughtful overview of the emotional and practical signs that it may be time to consider separation. I think it's such an important reminder that separation is it's often a gradual process, and most of the things that you said, they're probably happening over time, and one day a switch flips in your head and you know that it's time to consider separation. It's not always a single moment in time. Everyone's circumstances are different. You yourself are the best judge of whether you want to consider reconciliation or you do want to separate. Sometimes I have clients who begin the separation process, but then they reconcile and they get back together. So there's no right and wrong answer. There's no black and white answer here. And that's how family law works. That's as family lawyers, I believe we all three of us can appreciate the nature of family law and how it can change and how decisions change, emotions can affect law decisions. That actually leads us nicely into our next topic, which is what does it mean to be legally separated versus just informally separated? What's the difference? Why does it matter? Jen, I'll turn over to you. Can you walk us through the legal definition of separation in Ontario and some other factors that kind of come into play here?
Yeah, absolutely. So the guidelines for divorce comes from the Divorce Act, which is a federal regulation. It affects all Canadians. So under Section 8 of the Divorce Act, there is only one ground for divorce, which is the breakdown of marriage. And then under that, there are three different grounds to establish a marriage breakdown. So there is separation, cruelty, and adultery. So separation is far and away the most common one, and what we're here to talk about today. So Section 8 sub 2A specifically says that to qualify for separation, the spouses must live separately and apart for at least 1 year, immediately preceding the determination of the divorce proceedings, and we're living separate and apart at the commencement of the proceeding. So in simplified terms, this means that you can start a divorce proceeding the day you separate. However, a judge cannot grant a divorce until you have been legally separated for that 1 year. So for spouses to be considered as living separate or apart, they must be physically separated, and at least one of the parties must have an intention to be separated and apart. You won't be considered married if you are spouses who live separately but intend to stay married. So, for example, if your spouse lives in like Newfoundland and you live in Toronto, a lot of people have long distance marriages. You're still considered marriage. That's not going to be considered as living separate and apart. So an informal separation takes place when a couple begins living apart without any legal documentation or agreement. So this will count towards that separate time, but without a formal separation agreement, this can lack legal clarity, which may complicate future divorce proceedings. One of the most important things you will need when proceeding into a divorce is a very clear and mutually agreed upon date of separation. When you separate, it's important to have that clearly documented. You can live separate and apart under different roofs or even under the same roof. So courts are understanding that separated couples may not have the means right away for both parties to acquire their own residences right away. So in those cases, if there are issues on proving the date of separation, the court will look at factors that may show the parties, like were they living separately apart, separate lives, rarely communicating, eating separately, no shared social activities. How do you identify yourself to your friends and family? Are you still saying your couple? Are you saying like, we're apart now? And the occupation of separate bedrooms, these are all relevant considerations. There's not like one that's more important than the other. The court is going to look at all the factors altogether. And if you resume cohabitating during that 1 year with your partner, that may or may not reset the clock of your separation. Because depending on the amount of time you spend together, the courts will allow you up to 90 days to try reconcile in that period, and that will not reset the clock. However, if you reconcile and that is more than 90 days, then that will reset the clock.
Thank you, Jen. That was a very helpful breakdown of the legal framework, and I like how you hit on reconciliation and a 1 year time period there. People don't typically know these things, so it's very helpful speaking to a lawyer as you are deciding to separate. It's very helpful even speaking about your rights and obligations as you're thinking about the separation process because there's so much legal requirements and obligations and rights that can come into play here, and we'll talk more about those as we kind of roll more into our hour. But now that we understand what it means to be separated, the next step naturally is figuring out, well, what to do. Um, to talk us through the first practical steps you should take after separation, I'll hand things over to Mark.
Thank you, Sandra. Um, I'm going to address the first practical steps to take after the spouses have separated. This includes getting clear on your intentions. If you formulate a plan or intent to separate, it takes a tremendous amount of courage, faith, and confidence and hope. Stick to it, journal, and write down your goals. Write down what it is that you're separating from, not only who it is. and use that as a constructive and productive basis to go forward to plan on what your next chapter or what your short and long-term future is going to look like. Use the opportunity that you had from that relationship to have learned more about yourself, be open to what your likes and dislikes were. You could have entered into the relationship liking or having certain preferences. A longer term relationship, especially, it may turn around that certain things you liked 20 years ago you no longer prefer. That's perfectly fine. If the relationship is not fluid, as you are fluid, then you should be thinking about some further practical first steps to take. So again, self-reflection, emotional recovery. Weigh the decision very carefully. It's an important decision, but we weigh it carefully because it's about ourselves. Reflect and consider if you can hash out some differences. If two people decide to separate, they can still have their differences, and it may be constructive and productive to each of them who are separating to at least acknowledge, call upon, and share some discussions and some reflections about some points that were in disagreement. You don't have to see eye to eye, but there's a lot of benefit from just communicating openly with each other. As mentioned, could consider establishing some personal goals. And by this, I mean it's a wonderful time to take up a hobby or personal goals on the side. Could be a number of recreational leisure activities that you can engage in, something to take your mind off of the tumultuous situation of going through a separation. Some of them, in some circumstances, can be very heavy. Very important to think about self-care and what activities we can engage in to take our minds away from those stressful situations. Especially thinking about setting some boundaries and planning out some logistics, exchanging of the children, communicating with the ex. How are we going to set in place the children's schedule, various things of that nature, practicalities, and so on. It's a lot more still to come on the session, but those would be my go-tos on thinking about first practical steps to take following a separation.
Thank you, Mark. That was very useful because these early steps really set the tone for the process for the parties. Sometimes people will come to us and they're not usually thinking about their goal um, from the separation itself, right? Sometimes they can be too focused on the emotions, on retaliation. And so you really want to take some time to think about what it is that you want to gain from the separation and really focus on the most important areas of concern, especially if you have children. You want to think about them and what's best for them as you go through this. You want to shield them from any conflict. Um, Jen, I'll come to you because I would like to move to our next topic, which really is more about clear communication and careful planning when going through the separation. Can you please share some insights on the importance of communication and planning when it comes to separation?
Sure. Of course, when you separate, that's a very emotionally turbulent time. So it can be hard to communicate openly, respectfully, but certainly make the effort. You want to try to get on the same page with your former partner because that will save you a lot of headache and planning in the long run. So if you can come together and discuss things like, what is your date of separation? How will property be divided? If you have children, being clear as to when parenting time will be had and what decisions you will make together and apart maybe. And then specifically in the separation process, you also want to be cognizant if you have children that they are also party to this unfolding event and they should be looped in. So if you have children, communication is important to have with them as well. So don't be vindictive. Your children are not the ones to take out your frustration on. And you need to remember that this is hard on them too. So age appropriate communication about what is going on and what is going to change will help them navigate a difficult time, as well as hopefully strengthen your own bond as a parent and child going through something difficult together. And also, if you can amicably decide property support, any decisions regarding your children you may have with your partner, it will make the separation process much easier and more efficient. So, separation is never easy, but with open communication and rational planning, it can make it easier. So, it's also very wise to put that in a separation agreement. So, that will provide structure, clarity, and it can be very important in navigating your separation and then eventually perhaps even your divorce. So it's very important to get legal advice during this time. Family law is very complicated and it can also be very emotional. It will really help you to have a family lawyer on your side who will help you understand what comes next, what decisions need to be made, the best way to make those decisions, the best way to protect your rights and your interests, and to make sure that you are being treated fairly by your former partner.
Can I
Yeah,
add to that?
yeah.
I really agree with that, with what Jen's shared. Spouses should be fair with each other, and even though the love may be gone, the respect should still be there. And I think I agree. I agree with what Jen shared.
Thank you, Mark. Especially if you're co-parenting and if you have young children, then you will be communicating with each other for a long time, and you want to keep it respectful. And it's ideal to keep it amicable. Sometimes it can be hard to set those differences aside, but the end goal should always focus on what's best for everyone involved. Now,
Absolutely.
I'm going to talk about, I know we've had some great insights from Jen and Mark on communication and planning. Let's switch gears a little bit and talk about financials a bit more. And I'll talk more about um, gathering the financial and personal information as you go through the separation process. Um, Having a clear picture of your finances and your personal details is very essential as you go through separation because it helps you understand your current financial situation and your protects your interests. For example, um, if you own a home together, understanding its value, its mortgage, what the outstanding mortgage is, how it fits into your overall financial picture is really essential. This information will directly impact how the property is divided or equalized between the parties. In Ontario family law, when parties go through separation, they often need to complete their Form 13.1 financial statement form, which outlines their incomes, their assets, debts, expensive, and this information is essential um, because as you separate, obviously now you're switching from one household to two households. So you do want to, obviously, it's a big change for a lot of people. And it's a scary change because sometimes we have people who hasn't been working for a long time. And so big financial decisions come with the decision to separate, and which makes this process really scary for some people. And so you want to have a good idea of where you stand financially, and what are some of the financial decisions that you need to take to be able to live separate and apart. This information is also essential when it comes to equalization of that family property, which is the process that Ontario law uses to divide property fairly between spouses. Equalization refers to the process where um, both spouses are required to equalize the wealth that they've accumulated during the marriage. And that requires knowing the value of your assets that are owned by each party at the date of marriage, at the date of separation. This includes any real estate, some matrimonial home, any other properties, bank accounts, investments, pension, debts. And this Form 13.1 helps gather and disclose this financial information in a more clear and standardized way. And by completing and exchanging these financial statements, both parties can then calculate each person's net family property and determine if one party owes the other an equalization payment to balance out the value of what was brought into the relationship. This is true for married couples, If you're common law, the rules are different, but this is all much applicable for joint assets, for financial planning, for any potential trust claims. So to sum it up, gathering complete and accurate financial and personal information early on is essential. The financial matters play a big role in separation, and having a understanding of where you stand financially can really provide a clear picture of your situation, and it lays the groundwork for negotiations in the future. And with that important step covered, the next challenge that many separated couples face is figuring out where and how they'll live in the short term. We kind of hinted towards it. It takes time to finalize separation and divorce, and so temporary living arrangements is an important issue for a lot of people. Mark, we would like to hear from you on this topic.
Thank you. Just one on the gathering of financial information, just one point that I had. It's suggested to find a secure, safe storage place as you'll be taking a lot of documents as outlined, and you'll need a place to save them. So ideally, there's a nice secure document place to keep the documents, but moving forward on the temporary living arrangements and logistics, the decision of deciding, the decision of who remains in the home and who's leaving the home could be an approach. Another approach could be something called nesting, where there are children involved in a situation. Both spouses are going to share the enjoyment of the residence at the home. Children remain in the home. And you can just have one parent or spouse in the home for a certain period of time. They leave, children remain in the home throughout. The other spouse comes in if that works in some situations. In contemplating the temporary living arrangements and logistics, before leaving the home, it is imperative to consult with a family law lawyer. It is not advisable whatsoever to leave the home without consulting with a family law lawyer. There are certain situations, abuse occurs, you have to leave the home. Protect yourself at all times. If there is abuse, courts will reflect on that understandably. Courts do not expect spouses to remain living in an abusive environment. Courts expect spouses and separating spouses to put the children's interests first and to ensure the children are safe, free of harm, protected, and their interests are advanced and considered. If both spouses remain in the home, or if you're the spouse remaining in the home, may wish to consider setting clear boundaries regarding the other spouse's attendance at the home. It's important that if you're packing up items from the home and you are the one leaving the home, you want to think about what to do with high value or sentimental items, photos, heirlooms, family memorabilia have all been part of my litigation files. And it's difficult to turn to a client and say, sorry, I know things were very important or you had certain sentimental items. Don't know if we're going to see those again. There is always remedies available to the court or arbitrators if it goes that far to resolve any such issues. But sometimes, even after bringing contempt motions, you may not still see the items that were near and dear to you. Courts may consider a remedy of monetary damages if items are removed from the other spouse. That might not be adequate or sufficient to make up for the emotional loss of no longer having access to certain family memorabilia. If you're leaving the home, you want to find a place that fits your needs. And to do that, you'll want to think about transportation arrangements, work, school, whatever it is involved in your day-to-day routine, how that fits with the children's schedule, if there is any children, and how you can best structure the routine from leaving the home so that it's as manageable as possible. It's not going to be ideal. All the years that you've taken to work up and lead to your current residence and location and arrangements, it's all going to be put on the back burner and replaced with new arrangements. To some extent, some of these items you'll be going through or addressing, you'll be starting afresh. At the end of the day, if we focus on our objectives and our goals, everything should balance out in your interests. Back to Sandra.
Thank you, Mark. Your overview really brought out how much needs to be considered early on, from safety to logistics to the emotional impact of continuing to share a home. It's not always a simple decision. A lot of thinking goes into it. A lot of factors play a role. And like Marky said, it's best to speak to a lawyer before you make that decision. Sometimes people will rush to move out, and then there can be a lot of complications when it comes to parenting, for example. But again, if there are safety concerns, that should be the top priority. And so again, speak to a lawyer and they can guide you and advise you on some of the steps that you can take and protect your interests as you make these decisions. Um, Moving on, kind of, I believe once these immediate concerns are addressed, one of the other topics that come up is how to communicate these changes to your children and your family. And this can be a very challenging conversation. Jen, would you like to speak more on informing children and family, and what are some of the factors that people should take into account as they prepare for these conversations?
Sure. So one thing to keep in mind is that as you're telling your friends, family, and children about your separation, is that it will be a roller coaster. You will have all kinds of different responses. So some people will be supportive, some will be disappointed, and some will be angry, especially with family members of an older generation who really value, marriages that continue on no matter what, even if it shouldn't. They can find that news quite challenging, and it's just kind of something you'll have to deal with. You will also have people come forward with their honest opinion about your partner that they were keeping to themselves the entire time you guys were together. So watch out for that. If someone reacts in a way that's supportive, that is, of course, the best case. If someone reacts negatively, you just have to remind yourself that this was not a decision that you made lightly, and you have to trust that it was the best decision for you and your family. When it comes to your children, my personal opinion as a child of divorce is that it's the best thing to do is keep an open door policy and keep your children in the loop with all things that are, of course, appropriate for them to hear. And you want to be careful about how you word things and always try to speak neutrally about your partner if things didn't end well. It might be tempting to take the easy shots at them to relieve your frustrations in the moment, but that will have a long and lasting impact on your children. So ideally, you and your former partner will have the conversation jointly with your children. If that is not feasible for any reason, and there's many reasons, there's nothing wrong with having that one-on-one. Let your kids ask questions. It's okay to say, I don't know, or I don't think that is something we should discuss at this stage. And when it comes to your broader family, you want to talk to them about being respectful, making sure that they're not bashing your former partner around your children. They're keeping their conversations about what's going on appropriate or possibly like, just entirely away from the children. So setting boundaries among your friends and family to make sure that as you're navigating through this new chapter, that it's going to be healthy for you, healthy for your children, and they are respecting you and what you're going through.
Like, if I could add, I wholeheartedly agree with that. 3 points. United front when telling the children, tailoring the message given the children's age, and find if wherever possible between the two spouses, separating spouses, find a core message. By that I mean there's should be some core values that the separating spouses arrive at that they indicate that they can reflect and be fair with each other in a respectful manner and say, this isn't working as a result of this. And that's okay. That's how growth happens. If the relationship is ever going to get back on track, those discussions are going to happen. And if the relationship is going to have any respectful communication between the spouses after they've separated, it's important to address the reasons why it's led to a breakdown. From that, objectively and fairly and respectfully, if we find a core message, that core message can be instrumented into tailoring a message for the sake of how we should be telling children and extended family.
Yeah, and
In
then
my
to
opinion.
your point, something that you're taught when you're, taking like mediation courses is that if you have an adversary, something that will help move forward in a productive way is to find common ground. And oftentimes your common ground with your partner is your children. You want them to get through this as best as possible and to just remind you and your partner that having a healthy separation process is of the utmost importance for your children. So however bad your feelings may be, to just focus on the love you have for your children and be respectful and keep them as the priority.
Thank you, Jen and Mark. I think it's so important to have a united front. Children are young, they're sensitive, they they love their parents and they don't want to see conflict. And if the two of you, if a separating couple can show a united front, deliver the message calmly and clearly to the children, they don't need to know that separation has to be adversarial for them. It's a decision that parents have made, but they don't need to see the ugly side of it.
Yeah,
And kind
make
of
it like a
building,
mature process.
Mhm. And kind of building on that, I want to talk about the value of consulting professionals to help you navigate separation. And this can include lawyers, mediators, and counselors. Everyone plays their role in these discussions and in this process. First, talk about lawyers. Lawyers are very crucial when you need clear legal advice, especially about your rights, your obligations. There's so much that comes with a separation. Property division, support, parenting. We can help you ensure your interests are protected and we can guide you if court becomes necessary, especially. Um, Mediation can also be very invaluable in helping couples communicate and negotiate in a more structured, neutral environment. Mediation can save time, it reduces conflict, it can help parties reach agreements that work for everyone without the need for a lengthy court process. I always tell my clients attend one session if you can. Try it out. It's always worth it going to mediation. Even if it doesn't work, that's okay. We have the court process. We are here to assist with negotiations, but mediation, um, it's a great way to, at minimum, narrow down the issues. And having a neutral third party can really reinforce what's important, what are some things that you can let go, and really just help you and your ex-spouse with communication and finding your way through this process. There's also counselors and therapists, and they can provide much needed emotional support and coping strategies during this time. Separation is stressful, it can be very overwhelming, it's a big change. So, having professionals help to process your emotions, help manage stress can make a really big difference, not just for you, for also the children. And knowing when and how to reach out to these professionals is key. Early involvement often leads to better outcomes and less stress all around. Uh, we're almost done, but before we go, Mark, I'm gonna give it to you one last time. One last question before we go. Any last remarks as a experienced family lawyer on next steps after separation? What are your parting thoughts for our audience?
Next steps after separation, um, self-reflection, setting goals, setting what you would like the next chapter of your life to look like. I look at it this way. My former firm, in the reception, we had pictures of bridges. And as a family lawyer's role, and a lot of my colleagues, I think, would share this view as well. We're here to serve and to help the client bridge from the separation and the situation that you didn't like so much onto a situation that you like a lot more. And our role and what brings us to the office each day is that we take a lot of pride, we have a lot of passion in providing services to bridge our respective clients from the separation onto the next chapter of their life. We're aware that the separation you're going through, where there's children involved, is going to impact the children. We want to try to alleviate the burden and responsibility and the stress, the challenges, the uncertainty that come from the separation. It's very noble and courageous to draw your line in the sand and say, my boundaries have been pushed one final time. I'm not going to be continuing to subject myself to the other spouse's conduct. Standing up for yourself. The lawyers at Russell Alexander firm are there to support you during that process.
Thank you so much, Mark. And thank you, Jen, for sharing your valuable insights tonight. It was a pleasure having the two of you join this session. And thank you to our audience for tuning into our Family Law Now series. We are done for the night. Following this session, a brief survey will appear, allowing you to share your comments and suggestions that you have for any future topics that you would like us to explore. We appreciate your feedback. You can also book now to take advantage of for a complimentary consultation with one of our lawyers. Please contact our intake team at intake@russellalexander.com. You can mention our after hours series to schedule your appointment. Registration is also open for our next event, which is How Will Divorce Affect My Pension? You can go to russellalexander.com/familylawnow to register. Thank you again to our panelists for sharing their insights, and thank you to our audience for tuning in today.